it doesn't feel like work. So anyhow, that's how I got to where I am today, and every step that I've taken has really helped me in terms of how I approach my job here. And no, it's been great. I've had a lot of fortune along the way as well, but I'm happy that I've gone through it all.
Very interesting. So you're a West Coast guy, right? And you came east. You came east for the Central Connecticut job. Is that why you came east for that job?
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in California. I went to school in the Midwest, but then I went back to California to go to law school, to practice law for 7 years. The campaign I helped run was in California, but yeah, but this was the first time I was in Central Connecticut State for 6 months, but then I went back to California for 20 years. And so now I'm back living in Connecticut again, overseeing the ECAC.
So you graduated from Notre Dame in the 80s.
Yeah, 84, long time ago.
Must be, yeah, well, tell me about it. Well, these guys are like, I get it, but yeah, so you must be pretty happy after quite a good game Saturday night. That was
yeah, that was something else on Saturday night. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a Dodger fan too. Last time Notre Dame won the national championship, the Dodgers won the World Series, and that was in '88. So I've been waiting a long time for both of these things. So I don't know. If Notre Dame will get Clemson again, I don't know if it'll be very different next time around, perhaps. But it's nice while it's lasting.
Listen, you got to give Notre Dame credit, but at the end of the day, Clemson was a little banged up, but you still got to give them credit. So anyway, we divert sports because that's what we do, right? So sports,
oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and as these guys all know, we try to talk about the business side of sports and keep the focus there. But that's on me for going there, but not that I regret it. So tell me something, because I've worked in college athletics, and some of these people here do as well. But I would think it's very different being in a conference office than in an athletic department.
Right. No, that's a great question. And, I've kind of straddled those two career paths. So I went out, so I've both worked at conference offices and worked in athletic departments, and I think it's helped me. I think each one helps me with the other. I think it helped me get the athletic director job at Santa Clara that I had worked in the Pac-12, and it helped me get the ECAC job, being in charge of this conference that I had been an athletic director. And you don't find a lot of that. You find a little of that, but I'm a big believer in that. And by the way, just so you look at my career path, it's a field that it can be hard to stick someplace for 40 years, and that's just the nature of it. Not impossible. You see it, but you move up a little quicker if you want to move up, if you're ambitious. And I was a bit ambitious, I would say. And, but I wanted to do both career paths because I could see myself as a commissioner. I could see myself as an athletic director, and I kind of wanted to go for it. I thought, what the heck? The beauty of it is when like I'm sure you folks are, when you have that passion about what you want to do and you get in a job that you love, the cream rises to the top, and it really that will show that, and it'll distinguish you from others if you are the first one in, and you're trying to get to know everybody, and you have an enthusiasm about yourself, and that can be infectious, and it really helps. But I wanted to keep both of those alive, the possibility of a conference and the possibility of a school. I'm losing you. Can you hear? Are you muted, Dave?
Yeah, I muted myself because my.
Okay. And by the way, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hear me okay?
At least I can. Everybody hears them okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. So yeah, I muted myself because the friggin' dog is barking up a storm there. So you'll appreciate this. My dog. I'm a Met fan, so my dog's name is Shay. So.
Yeah.
But I always found it intriguing, having worked obviously with a lot of conference people over the years, either at the Football Foundation or when I was at Iona. And I mean, you probably were Tom Hansen, Pac-12.
Yeah. Tom hired me at the Pac-12. Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
guy, terrific guy.
He's
And
a great guy.
then,
Very different leadership style than Larry Scott, who's the Pac-12 commissioner now. Dramatically different. But yes, I like Tom a lot.
well, let's talk about that. That's a good segue. Then let's talk about leadership styles. I'm glad you brought that up. Why are they so different? Which is better, or is it just a matter of you have to be true to yourself? What do you think about leadership styles?
Well, it's the classic conference commissioner dilemma, and with Tom Hansen, the previous Pac-12 commissioner, he had a pretty good view that he wasn't so much I would say a visionary. He wanted to do what the schools wanted to do, and so he wanted to figure out what the consensus of the schools was, and then go lead with those instructions. And with Larry Scott, you have the opposite. You have a guy coming in saying, I know where we need to go, and I'm going to bring the conference with me. And you could argue both about who's more successful. In the Pac-12, they got all in, and they gave him a lot of, he's the highest paid conference commissioner, and they went all in on that Pac-12 network, and they're spending a mint. And most of the other big conferences are giving back a lot more money than the Pac-12 is to their schools, a ton more money. The Big Ten, the SEC, of course, SEC is bringing back the most, the Big 12. But Larry Scott has placed this bet on, we're going to own our whole Pac-12 network. We're not, and so when we go back to the marketplace in 2024, it's a long wait, but when they go back to the marketplace, they're not going to have to share with anybody. But what they're missing out on right now, in terms of revenue, is going to have, you can tell it's having an impact. You could argue that some of the schools or some of the conferences have passed them up in basketball, passed them up in football. But those are two dramatically different approaches to conference leadership, and they both have pluses and negatives. Larry Scott has been. Some people would think, how does he have a job? Because he's the highest paid, and the others are right now exceeding results. But he, the commissioners, they know that the presidents, the college presidents, ultimately are the ones that fire them or hire them, and he's connected very well with those presidents out there. But he's taken a lot of heat. So anyhow, Tom Hansen on the other hand got criticized for his style too, because maybe he wasn't hard charging. This is where we need to go. He was more, hey, where do we need to go? Is everybody on board? Okay, now let's do that. And I think, of course, like so many things, my style and my preference is in between those two.
Yeah.
You can't be all one or all the other. You need to figure out, and sometimes it's issue by issue, but is this an issue that I think I need to get the consensus of the group on, or is this an issue where I need to lead for this group and show the way? And aspects of my own career, I've tried to do one or the other, depending on the situation in front of me.
Yeah. Well, that's a good comparison. Appreciate that. And again, working with a lot of these guys over the years, the guy that I thought, I personally thought was one of the best in the commissioner game was Gene Corrigan. Gene passed away within the last year. Just a tremendous guy, just a really smart guy. Obviously, his son followed in his footsteps. Is now the AD, was the AD at Military Academy, and now is, I think he's at NC. Sorry? Yeah. So, but you guys.
And Gene, let me just say one quick thing about Gene. When I was at the Pac-12, and I was an assistant commissioner, I talked to Gene. The nice one thing I neglected to mention that when I got into this field, I realized you got to network. You are only as good as the legion of people that you know, that you've introduced yourself to, that you continue to keep in contact with. So I tried to do that famously. I tried to reach out to people I didn't know. Gene Corrigan was one of them. When I contacted him, and I said, hey, it's kind of my hope or my aspiration to be an athletic director. And he's like, why do you want to do that? I mean, he was kind of negative on it, and I mean, it's from a good place. There's a lot of demands on you. They can be impossible jobs. There's a lot of politics and all that. It was just fascinating that he almost was trying to talk me out of it. Some of it was tongue in cheek, but some of it wasn't. And I understand now at this phase of my career what he was talking about, but I still wouldn't trade it. I had 11 years at Santa Clara. I loved it. And yes, there were big problems. And even a place you think, Santa Clara, how much politics can there be at a place like, it's D1, but you're going up against Gonzaga every year in hoops. Yeah, there's tons. and I was at Cal Berkeley, you might think, academic school, how much politics? Oh, there's tons of politics there. So that's what he's talking about. But I'm not saying there's not headaches. There are headaches. Yeah. But I just thought that was interesting that was his advice to me. You got a law degree. Well, go practice law. hey, I did. And there's headaches in that too. So
all right. Anyway. Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that story, Dan, because that definitely sounds like Gene. And truth be told, a lot of people given that advice or given that kind of presentation would shy away or back off. It's kind of what we tell people about who want to work in sports, especially, when you're starting out. It's sometimes, a lot of these jobs are not high paying. You're going to be the first one in, you're going to be the last one out. You have to need to network, you have to connect. And sometimes it's just a matter of being fortunate in the right place at the right time. Presenting,
oh yeah.
And that's, but you mentioned something earlier, and I wanted to go back and talk about this in terms of how it applies to the ECAC, about being a visionary. Some of these guys might be too young, and hopefully they've done a little background on what the ECAC is and what the ECAC over the years. When I was in college athletics, the ECAC was the number. It was, I think at one point it was bigger. It's like every school in the Eastern Seaboard, right? But so they were putting on more championships, I think, than the NCAA was at one point. So
right.
Everybody, they ran the academics, All America stuff, or all of the honors and the awards for football players, which you kind of had to submit your player of the week and player of the year, and they had a big banquet every year and a big conference. So, but you've had to kind of almost, I don't want to say reinvent, but kind of think a little bit out of the box with what the conference is doing, right?
Right. Yeah. So, and circumstances dictate a lot of that. So when I got back here 4 years ago, the ECAC has been around 85 years, 250 schools in D1, 2, and 3. We put on championships for all three divisions. We do D3 bowl games. We do for D1, which most people are most familiar with D1 generally. What we do for D1, we put on the best track and field championships for them and swimming championships. And that's why all of the New England schools, we got the whole Ivy League, we got all the Big East schools, they're with us for what we do for track. So that's in very specific things we do for D1. But for D3, we do everything. We're like the NIT for every sport: volleyball, baseball, basketball, you name it, football bowl games. And then for D2, there's a variety of things we do. When I got back there, when I came back here, we were in a bit of I took over a challenge, and financially it was struggling a bit, and so I needed to try a ton of new things. So I needed to be more like a Larry Scott in terms of, here's where we need to go. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try that. But I got my membership along with me. But in some cases, I had to convince them. And one of those cases was esports. I saw we saw, and I'm not, I was not an esports guy at all, but when I got to the ECAC, I'm looking at everything. And we started equestrian, and we went in on rugby and crew and all these things that the ECAC hadn't necessarily gotten involved in. And I was trying everything just to see what might work to help so we could provide more value to our members. And there were a lot of naysayers with esports, but some of the college college presidents were saying, hey, esports we'd be interested if you guys want to do something on esports because that's going to help with our enrollment. And some of the presidents that knew about it knew this thing is coming, it's international, it's big, there's an academic potential component to it, and certainly an enrollment piece. And I was the most unlikely guy to try it, but I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll get educated. And so we started it. And we had 12 schools that first year, and next year we had 27. Now we've got 75 schools across the country. We're coast to coast for esports. 75 schools, we're running 10 games. We have 300 teams. We have, 1,800 participants. And we're just going to expand every year. Pretty soon we'll have 20 esports games. We'll probably have 150 schools with us for esports. And it is absolutely a game changer for us financially too. It's helping fund, especially in this pandemic, it's helping fund and keep us around. And so that's an example of the Larry Scott type of approach. If I'd just done the Tom Hansen approach, I don't know that we would have tried that. But anyhow, and then so my strategy now is, let's use esports to keep us around, keep us relevant, until, we had very good news today about a vaccine, until we can get college sports back to what, because we're not bringing in much of anything or doing much of anything right now for traditional sports.
Yeah, I'm going to open up the questions here in a second because I don't want to wait to the end. But so if you have questions, think about them, and I'll ask in a second. But I have another question for Dan about the model and the kind of the business model of a conference, because you're mentioning that the esports is kind of you're kind of a money driver right now. How does a conference make money? What are their revenue streams and
yeah. So I mentioned we have 250 schools for traditional sports, and so those are memberships, and they're annual memberships. So we have 250 schools paying us to be a member every year, and for that they can participate in all of our championships. And what it means typically for D3, for example, if you're they all have their own conference, so they'll be in their primary conference of 10 schools, 12 schools, like we all know about, but and the winner of that conference, let's say in volleyball, will go to the NCAA tournament. Well, if you have a 500 record or better, and you're not going to go to postseason because you didn't make the NCAA tournament, you can come play in the ECAC championships if you're a member of the ECAC. So these D3 schools, they all want to be members just for postseason opportunities. So again, whether it's baseball or softball or field hockey or you name it, basketball, they have a chance to play in our postseason tournaments, our bowl games. And so we get paid memberships, annual memberships from our 250 schools. We have Flow Sports televises our championships, so we have revenue associated with that. Broadcasting revenue. We have sponsorships. So so much of what we do, we've aligned with a partner that is out aggressively selling sponsorships for us, and those are and then we have some ticket revenue for our bigger championships, our bowl games, and our D1 track and field. For our swimming championships, we make a little bit of money from revenue from tickets, or we did before a pandemic, and so we had all of those. But even that, when I got there, that's what we had, and it wasn't quite cutting it. But adding esports has been a game changer, and just in 3.5 years, we now have significant revenue from esports, and it's a similar model. We get membership for esports, schools paying to be a member, but what I found 8 months ago was we tried to make a big splash about what we were doing with esports, and I had more than three, but three different companies from different areas come to us and want to partner with us and help fund us in exchange for some of the upside long term. And one was a Wall Street firm, and one was one of these advertising sponsorship, college athletics advertising sponsorship firms, and one was a traditional esports company. And we kind of worked all three of them and got a real sweet deal. And we went with the college athletics sponsorship company, and they are funded, by the way, with some Wall Street money. And so indirectly we are too, but it's a great thing for us, and it enables us. It took us from a mom and pop shop for esports to a really professional esports operation. We now have, and so we have broadcasting from on ESTV. It's a linear channel, and you can get it on Roku and a bunch of other different ways. Our esports, we get 60,000 views a week for our esports activity, which is just mind-blowing. But I'm sure at least half of you have a pretty good sense of esports and what it is and how big it is, and maybe all of you do. But a couple of years ago I didn't, and so that's actually a nice message, that you don't have to have come from that background. But what the first thing I did was hire somebody. We brought in an intern, and then we hired her, and she's now our director of esports. But esports is the last piece of revenue that we're getting, and it's really more than individual memberships and more than the broadcast. It's this partnership that we have with this company that is funding us in exchange for really bringing us their vision is for us for the ECAC to be like the NCAA of esports, and that's a big, bold, ambitious vision, and so many other companies and different entities are trying to achieve that. But if we even get to half of that, just right now with 75 schools and 10 games and 300 teams, it's pretty cool, and it's allowing us to really provide value to our schools. So that's a long way of telling you what all our revenue sources are.
No, I appreciate it. I think it's interesting, and just for the edification of the class, I didn't prepare. We're not in cahoots, but would you tell us the program that your intern, who became your director of esports, where she came from?
Yeah, well, yes, right there. Yeah, she's
Manhattanville. She's one of our grads. Lydia. Yeah. Came in and got her master's, got the internship through the program. Dan then hired her and came back and said, I'm not saying this is still the case, but he's looking for more people, and hopefully he'll still be looking for more good people.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
And she's not the only Manhattanville intern we've had too, by the way, but she's one that I hired, and she's our director of esports, and she is a big reason for our success as well.
Well, she loves it. She obviously loves it. We actually ran an esports class a couple summers ago, and I didn't teach it, but I facilitated it. I just got a bunch of guests. She knew more about esports than I did. So but yeah, I'm glad that worked out for her and for you guys. So.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Dan? I'll pause here, and you can jump in.
Yeah, hey Dan. Thanks for joining the class this evening.
Sure.
So I guess like the sports industry has kind of been a little funky lately because of coronavirus, and I guess just one example is ESPN. They just laid off like 300 employees. So I guess my question to you is, like, what kind of advice do you have for the class as there continues to be hiring freezes, furloughs, and people just getting fired, throughout the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's I think it places a premium. Well, first of all, yes, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's like any industry. It's not just this industry, but any industry. There's going to be challenges right now, but there's also going to be opportunities. And so, like what I've seen, some of people my age or people that even 10 years younger than me, which are still pretty old in your world, they're losing their jobs, and that's creating, and part of it is because they're making so much money, and they're hiring more entry-level people. So it can create opportunities for you folks as well. But I think what happens, it just places a premium on what I talked about earlier, connections, making connections and introducing yourself to people. So when I took that first job at Notre Dame, when they weren't paying me, I took a trip to California when Notre Dame went out to play USC, and I went up and down the coast, and I went to San Diego State, and I went to Loyola Marymount, USC, and UCLA, and I went to the Pac-10 office. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I introduced myself to people in those athletic departments and people that I thought might potentially help me at some point, and Cal and Stanford as well, because I wanted to go back and work in California, and some of those relationships I made just on that trip stayed with me to this day, and one of them helped me get the Cal job. The gentleman that I introduced myself, and he sat down with me at the Pac-10 for half an hour. When I was at Central Connecticut State, he called me and he said, "Hey, Cal is about to list a job that you might be interested in. I thought of you right away." Blah blah blah, and so it didn't get me the job, but it made me know about it, and I was ready. And I cannot say enough about that type of networking. And I used to teach at USF, and they have a sports management class as well, degree. And I told the students that this degree helps, but it's the networking that you do. So be aggressive, and if you're not the type to be aggressive, become that type. And when I say aggressive, you don't want to be annoying, but you just want to be. You want to reach out and say, "Hey, I respect. I saw your profile on LinkedIn or whatever, or I read about this thing that you did, and I respect what you've accomplished. I would love to have a Zoom call with you or a phone call, or you used to be able to say, yeah, I'll take you to lunch or have a cup of coffee. But can you just can you talk to me for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that, and just try to do that. Just create a little calendar for yourself. I'm going to do one of those a week, or two of those a week, or whatever you are comfortable with. And not every one of them will be successful, and that's okay. And a lot of people won't even return your call, and that's okay. But just like the guy in the bar that's asking every woman to dance, well, okay, one of them say no, but one of them say yes. Okay, that's all you need. You just want as many connections as you can to pay off for you. And I can't. And in this industry, like a lot of industries, who you're connected with it makes all the difference. And there's so many ways to do that now with LinkedIn and other ways that people can connect these days. So be smart about it, but there's no shortage of people that will take your call. Anyhow. So in this program, you probably have speakers that come talk to you every week. Just connect with some of those folks and say, hey, give me some advice. People love to be a mentor. A lot of people love to be a mentor. That's what people at Notre Dame were for me. And I'm just so appreciative of the woman at Notre Dame who hired me. She walked on water in my eyes. And it has made me want to do the same for others. And you will find people like that, like Gloria Navarro's at the WCC, who I did that for her. And now she's, oh my God, she's a mentor for tons of people. So I think that more than anything is the best advice for people, not just in this pandemic environment, but generally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's really good advice. And oh, look, we have a special guest coming on. I think he wants to bust your chops, Dan.
There he is. How you doing, Mr. Coonan?
Yeah, he's always looking to do that. What's happening, my friend?
How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. So, guys, when I told you a few moments ago about that, we had a couple of companies vying to partner with us on esports. it was Mike's company that we went with, CSMG, and it's been a great. I told him all about what direction we're going with esports, Mike, with your guys' capable assistance and all.
I appreciate that. This guy is a great wealth of knowledge, and hopefully Mr. Toromio has him with you guys for the night. It's a great partnership, and I actually see a couple of familiar faces on there with some former students of mine.
I'm sure you do.
Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, great relationship. And everybody, if you have esports questions, I just wanted to hop on and say hello to my good friend Dan over here. But if you have esports questions, there's nobody better to be asking a lot of good stuff to Dan, because that's where a lot of the jobs are going to be in the future.
Right. And I told him, Mike, about so Lydia, who is our esports director, who came from Manhattanville, came highly recommended by Mike, and she started out with us just as an unpaid intern, not unlike my first job way back when at Notre Dame. And the way she just eliminated any kind of a search when we needed to hire an esports director was that she just killed it for us as an intern. And it wasn't even close. I mean, and we didn't even think about listing it, just because we knew that she came in, like the great recruit that comes in and in the first practice just destroys the whole competition because they're such a beast on the field. She did that for us, for esports as an intern, and so anyhow, so that's getting back to that message. That's another good way. If you can afford it in this environment, if you can't get a job, do not let that be a deterrent. Just go figure out a place. And maybe it's not working 48. Maybe you have a different job or a part-time something. But just say, hey, I just want to help you out. What can I do? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, both you guys, Mike and Dan, because you've hired a lot of people over the years. You're both growing in your companies and in organizations, and so I would, for both of you, maybe the class would be benefit by hearing, when you look at a resume, when you look at an email, whatever it is, whether it's a job you're posting or somebody's coming to you, cold, what jumps out? What is it that you're looking for in that resume or in that presentation? It's a first step. Hey, Dan, why don't you start?
Yeah. So, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm about to run out of a phone, but I think, but it looks like I have a better internet.
All right, let's try that again. Let's go back to that.
So hold on just a sec.
We're playing with technology.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, well, and it happens again. I'll say just one last time. If you can have them know about you before the resume even comes, that's the best thing. And that comes from the networking that I'm talking about. But you're not going to be able to do that for every job. What you would like, the thing is, and this has happened for 30 years. Every time there's a job opening, there's 100 resumes. And so how do you distinguish yourself? And if, so do your networking. And if you know somebody who can plop that resume on the desk of the hiring person or the person who's going to hire, again, all of those are the best. Or a personal note together with the resume to the person. I'm a big believer in personal notes and all, but the resume, I think it's almost you want it to be professional looking, I've seen a wide variety of different formats for it. I think there's going to be some spin on it. I think it's almost more important to line up people that can say this is a good person to hire. I really think I think the resume is not as critical as those other things that I've been talking about. However, you don't want to blow it on the resume. You want to look at that thing closely and make sure there's no misspellings, and make sure it does sound good, and it's complete sentences that really sound somewhat eloquent and all of that. But know that it's in many ways it's your the last person you worked for. You want that person to be reaching out for you. So again, another aspect of this, or like Mike, for example, when Mike.
I think we lost you, Dan.
Any resume, no matter what you're going to write on a resume, that type of testimonial from a guy that I know is you can't measure that. And so anybody you've worked for, you start in maybe, if you've never had a job, or go to a teacher. You're in this program, you've met a ton of teachers, Dave or someone else, and say, hey, Dave, I'm applying for this job. Do you know anybody there? Would you be comfortable, and make sure you have a great, solid relationship with whoever it is you're asking that of, because, if you've had problems with them and then you're asking them to call, that's just not going to help. But ideally, you've impressed the hell out of somebody in your life. Go to that person and try to have them sell somebody on a job for you. And that beats a resume. However, make sure that resume is solid in the way it looks, but that's not going to make or break your job.
Good points. So any other questions for Dan here about management or style of conference, college athletics in general, the partnership that he has with Mike's company, anything?
Hey, Dan. As the NCAA canceled the fall championships and they may continue to cancel winter and spring, do you think the ECAC can leverage that and have safer regional tournaments maybe in the spring?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly what we're looking at. And there's some challenges to that because the NCAA has created something where if you limit your schedule to 50%, the athletes can get their eligibility back. And so schools are scheduling 50% of their games. So if they play a season of 50% and then they try to play in a playoffs that we have, a championship that we have, it'll count, and it'll eliminate a year of eligibility for the kids. So I have in front of the NCAA right now a request for an interp to make that go away and to make it be 50% of your season, but postseason doesn't count for that, and that would be for NCAA postseason or any other postseason. And we're hopeful, but I'm a little frustrated. It's been a couple of weeks. We haven't heard back on that. I just emailed them again today. But you're right. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to use it, just kind of like I said earlier, use the pandemic. Yes, it's a challenge. But there'll be opportunities. Same thing with this. The NCAA won't be able to do championships in the way they've traditionally done, or they might limit them, or they might have some go away. That's where we can step in and use it as an opportunity. So absolutely, that's what we're here for. Great question.
Thank you.
Dave, if I could just give a little shameless plug here, and then I'm going to head out here. But you guys are also sitting, and you guys and girls are also sitting with an author of a phenomenal book here.
I was going to ask about that.
So it's a good segue. But all kidding aside, he can teach you about life. He can teach you about business. But in the times we're living in, right, where there's a new president-elect that just happened this past weekend, there's a book out there called Presidential Spirits. And I don't know about you, Dave, but in my classes, I make it mandatory.
Yeah. What's up on this?
Are you getting a commission? I haven't.
I'm getting a commission. Dan, I'll await my commission check tomorrow.
Yeah,
right, pal?
Yeah. That's how it works. They know how that's the world. That's how the world works. Yeah, I wrote I wrote a novel. I always wanted to write a novel, and I just sat down when I took the job at the ECAC. my social network was all in California, so I had a little more time at night, and I sleep less these days. So I just started writing, and I just actually was a little frustrated with our political partner, a partisanship, and so it's kind of a political field of dreams. So it's called Presidential Spirits, but that's nice of you, Mike.
Yeah. Mike, you're right. I was going to ask Dan about.
I got. Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask a question. Hi, Dan.
Hey.
Nice to meet you and everything. So since you've been in the career of sport, like the sport industry, right? What has been the biggest challenge you guys have ever faced in your career? The biggest challenge that you had come across.
Yeah, I think the politics of these jobs can be fierce, and it's a function of how athletics is so public, and you'll have a board of trustees that some of them just want, you have a board of trustees at a school, and a lot of them are, rightly very interested in the academic profile and reputation of the university. You'll have someone on that board who just want athletics to be good. They're a former star or whatever. And then you've got the president, and the president's dealing with his or her own challenges in politics. And at times if something bad happens in athletics, they want to distance themselves from you. But if something good happens, they want to take credit for it. And just figuring out how to manage the politics of all of that. And Woodrow Wilson, who was president of the United States, but also at one point was president of Princeton, he says the politics of colleges are much crazier than the politics of the United States. This is, and that's not necessarily true, but that's what he was talking about, that there's fierce territorial battles, professors and you name it. And so I think that challenge, just navigating all of that and trying to keep people happy, but also doing the right thing. And there are a couple instances, maybe if I had to do my whole career over again, where and most of the time I think I did this. I'm just going to do what I think is right. And I know that might hurt me with this political component of campus, but this is the right thing to do, damn it. Once or twice, I probably had colored my decisions by what I thought maybe a president or a board of trustee member really would have crushed us on if I didn't go that route. And didn't do that a lot. And sometimes I famously went against, like we hired, I had a chance to do the search for the football coach at Cal back in 2001, and the politics of that were fierce, and so many of the important people wanted us to hire former Cal people, that football coaches that they knew. But we had a chance to hire Jeff Tedford, who was an offense coordinator extraordinaire from Oregon. And he'd never been a head coach, but my God, he was running that whole offense, and they were killing it. And we hired him instead of some of these former coaches who had coached at Cal. Bruce Snyder had success at Cal, but left for a better job. And then he had trouble at Arizona State, and everybody wanted us to hire him back because they knew him and they loved partying with him. We hired Jeff Tedford, and some of the donors said, we will stop giving. But we beat Baylor by 50 points in the first game, and he had the biggest turnaround. We were 1-10 the year before he took over. We ended up 6-5, and everything was great from then. And that's what I'm talking about. But sometimes you can't always have the political capital to pull that off. And the safer thing is hire the one that they all want you to hire, but that might, there may be compliance issues with that person. There may be integrity issues with that person. You do the right thing and know that at some point, these jobs are so precarious at times. It's really hard. It's really hard to keep some of these jobs for 20 years, 25 years, and you might not want to, which kind of gets back to what Dean Corrigan was talking about. But I think that that interplay with the politics is the most challenging.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure, sure.
Anybody else? Questions for Dan? Conference, college, jobs, management style?
Hey, Dan. Hello.
Go ahead, JT.
Can you guys hear me? Good. I just have pretty bad Wi-Fi.
No worries.
Well, thanks, Dan, for joining us today.
Sure.
I just have one quick question, and it's kind of relevant to me right now because I'm kind of in my in between from graduating, finishing undergrad, and to where I'm at now. When you were our age, who would you say was your biggest influence, or who did you look up to the most, and how did that person help get you to where you are today?
When I was your age, so when I was in college, before I had entered any positions, I think I had a professor at Notre Dame, and I went to him to write a letter of reference for me to a couple of schools, and not in a arrogant way, but he sat down with me and he said, "What do you want to do in life? And why are you applying to these schools?" And he just challenged me, and the implication was that I wasn't thinking big enough, and my God, I'm young once. Why don't I just go for it? And that maybe I was settling, and it was an interesting take, and he wasn't the only one there. There was a business professor that had the very same kind of approach to me, and it was a consistent message. And I have to say, it's maybe one I didn't immediately resonate with me as much, but after a few years, I'm like, why not? Well, if not me, why? Why not me? And when I busted into the college athletics field, I'm like, I want to try to be an AD or a commissioner, and I'm just going to do what I have to do, and helps me. I'm very fortunate. I'm a white male at a time when it was more challenging for someone that doesn't look like me to proceed the way I did. And I've had I've had fortune smile on me in other ways, but I do think that just that message from him back there in college, why not go for it, is probably the most influential for me.
Yeah, good. Thanks for sharing that. And it's amazing how certain people do stick in your memory from times, and who's helped you and who you've gone to for advice. Any other questions for Dan?
Yeah, Dan. So I have another question for you. So where exactly do you see esports, I guess, in 5 years from now, and where or how exactly do you think we should start in terms of applying for an internship or entry level job there?
I'm sorry, did I miss something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yes.
Why don't you repeat it?
So, yeah. So my question was, where exactly do you see esports, 5 years down the line from today, and where or how exactly do we start in terms of applying for an internship or an entry level job in that industry in esports?
Right. So I think it's only going to keep building, and this pandemic has set that on steroids, I think, as well, just because there's not as much competition, and esports was able to continue. I think that in 5 years, every school is going to have a varsity team, teams, tons of teams. And the interesting thing, there's just going to be more games being, these publishers are going to keep coming up with more games. And I think it's going to be something significant. And I think that, but the biggest thing for your, maybe for the way you guys might look at it is, I do think there will be opportunities, and even if they aren't here right now, they're going to be very soon. And if we get out of this thing pretty quickly, I think that's all going to come back. And everyone's going to have it, and the broadcasting and sponsorship related to it is going to fund this industry and produce a lot of jobs, and it is already. So that's the first part of your question. The second, I would, in terms of internships, I would go beyond. So you can look for internships, of course. I would just send us one. Send Lydia something. Don't wait for a posted internship. Just find an organization that's doing esports or anything, by the way, even if it doesn't have to be esports. It could be whatever other type of subsection of this field of athletics that you want. Just reach out to somebody and say, hey, I would love to work for you. I can do it remote. If there's anything that I can conceivably do for you, I'm in. Let me know. Let's have a conversation. Sometimes they're so busy and understaffed, they don't even have time to put together a formal internship posting. And they may not, and when they do, they may just send it to their conference and say, hey, can you circulate this around all your athletic directors? And it might never get to you. And that can help you, though, because the moment when you decide to reach out directly to somebody who hasn't advertised this thing to all the world, that eliminates the world as a competitor, and maybe you'd have a shot at it. So, Lydia, who's a former Manhattanville person, she's a great. If somebody's interested in esports, she'd be a great person to connect with too. By the way, just she'd have a soft spot for you, being from Manhattanville, but she has her finger on the pulse now. I mean, she's very respected in the esports world, and connect with us. But not just that. You could, there's so many other organizations, esports organizations, that would love to have somebody working with them right now, and they're all so new to it that it might not even occur to them that there's programs like yours with people like you that would like to help out.
Thank you.
Good information there. It's funny because when Dan and I were kind of starting out doing this stuff, and even up until 25 years ago, we had, and they're not that they don't still have them, but you had the conventions, you had the NCAA convention, the NACTA convention, the COSIDA convention, the ECAC CIDA convention. You had I know people who went out and went to the Major League Baseball owners meetings, GM meetings, just to walk the lobby, or the NFL meetings. And it's obviously, these are things we can't do currently, but the point is you sometimes you got to step out of your comfort zone too, and call somebody or send an email. Or, the key is you want to be aggressive, but you don't want to be obnoxious. You call somebody every day. If you ever watch the movie Wall Street, the guy calls every day. You don't want to be that person, but you want to be, you want to be smart about it. And then you obviously, Dan said it, you guys have a lot more options nowadays in terms of online, LinkedIn. If you follow somebody on Twitter, if you follow somebody, through what you read in the Sports Business Journal and things like that, which brings me to my last question, or one of my last questions for Dan, and it's this: has there been a book? Now you're a writer, so you've written a book now, which I personally look forward to reading. But on a management side, is there a book that you think of, when you're managing, man, I'm glad whether it was in college or not. Is there somebody or a book that you can recommend?
You know what? And I a lot of staff members I've had are avid readers of management books, and all. I've always been more of an observer of people and taking inspiration from people I've worked with and people I've observed, and trying to connect with them. And so some of the management books that I've looked at and read, I'm a little skeptical, and and so and you know, maybe this says more about story. How can I replicate that? And the point is, it can't necessarily always be replicated. It takes really hard work, and it takes some good fortune. So yeah, I think maybe I like biographies better than management training tools. I would rather read about Steve Jobs, his life story, or Phil Knight's life story, and take that as opposed to here's what you need to do for management. And I am, like all these books you see up here, these are all biographies. A lot of presidents, because I'm fascinated by that, and that's what my book was about. But a lot of other individuals who have just inspire me in one way or another by the way they've lived their life and the way they've solved problems and been ambitious and done good for the world. And so I much prefer that. And you can learn good and bad from that as well. Like there's a ruthlessness about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and a lot of other really effective, whether it's politicians or CEOs. And I take some of that, you know, I don't want to be that way, but there's an aspect of that that you have to know about and deal with in your own way. You know, I firing people there. The question asked of me earlier, what's the biggest challenge? Firing people is hard, but you look at the way some people do it in a very ruthless manner, uncaring, and you learn from that. You're like, okay, he got to be very successful doing that. I'm going to do it differently. And if that makes me not as successful, okay, well, I want to be a person that I want to be proud of in addition. So I think, so in terms of that, you know, I love the, again, I can talk about biographies. I don't know that that's exactly what you're looking for, but I love biographies, but like Lincoln, for example, just my God, what politics he was thrown into and how he dealt with it and how he took some of his biggest and most fiercest rivals and put them in his own cabinet, which just speaks volumes about him and leadership, where, you know, the tendency is just take a bunch of yes men and put them all around you, and everybody's telling you and blowing you up and telling you how good you are. He had people around the table that were ripping the hell out of him. But he was strong enough that he's like, okay, all 8 of you want me to do X. I'm going to do Y. It helps me that I know that all 8 of you wanted me to go the other way, but I'm the only vote that matters here. You know, he would say things like that, but he would listen. Yeah, I think those are the books that I've learned the most from.
Good. Last call for questions for Dan. Dan Coonan. Anybody? Okay. Anybody? No. Dan, thank you so much. I do have one last thing, and you know, two things. Tell our guys where they can get your book. And no, just in case they want to, you know, where
you can. It's on Amazon or dancoonanauthor.com. Either one of those, or if you want a signed copy, just you can Venmo me if you just hit me on LinkedIn or email me or whatever. It's actually it's been thrilling. It's been gotten great reviews, and it's been a great diversion at a crazy time. But it's like a political field of dreams. So anyhow, but that's, yeah, Amazon or through me or through my website, dancoonanauthor.com.
Excellent. That's, well, I laugh, but I mean, I actually think I'm thinking of writing a book myself, but I won't get into that right now. It has
well, I have on my website, I have a little essay I wrote trying to inspire others to, because I know I always wanted to do this when a friend of mine wrote a novel, and I didn't even know that she was writing it. And then one day on Facebook, I saw it, she announced it. Like, oh my God, it just prompted me finally. Like, I've been wanting to do this for 40 years. Why don't I do it? So so I took that. I just wrote a little essay trying to inspire others to write if they've always wanted to do that as well. So anyhow, I can send you that, Dave, if you want.
Thanks. Yeah, please do.
Give me that extra impetus to get it done.
And the last thing is, you don't have to, but we were talking about doing a panel in January. You want to share some thoughts on that, or you want to wait on that?
Oh no, no. Yeah, it was. And by the way, let's connect on that, Dave, because we've got some dates in December.
Yep.
And I've got a pretty good group. So we're doing 3 consecutive panels on mental health in college athletics, and the first one, I think it's the first one. There are 3 consecutive Wednesdays, I think, in December, and
Good.
the first one is mental health professionals. The next one will be students, just talking about their own struggles, and then the final one will be some coaches and administrators talking about it as well.
Yeah, looking forward to those. Dan, thank you. You're a gentleman for taking the time. I know you're coming back next week in Gene's class, and thank you so much.
Happy to do it. Good luck to everybody. If I can help in any way, let me know.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
I will. I'll email you guys tomorrow with kind of a. Let me think about it overnight in terms of what we should do for Dan. Okay, but thank you. And any questions for me? Spring schedule. If you look for the spring schedule, I think we're going to be online again in the spring. So I'm just taking a little longer trying to figure out what exactly classes are going to work. So, but I think we'll be okay. All right. We don't do anything over winter anyway, so just take some time off here after Thanksgiving almost. Finish this class up. We don't start. Pardon me. We don't start the spring semester this year. They just told us till February 1st, so it's around the same time, but it's a little later. All right. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Hope you're all well. Stay well.
Thank you, Professor.
Have a good night.
Hello.